of the Governance and Audit Committee, which, due to government advice to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available to view via the Council's website as soon as is possible following the meeting. Everyone participating today will be accessing the meeting from remote locations. Please could everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Use your mobile phone at any time throughout the meeting. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference, and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members or officers wish to raise a hand, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please then lower your hand once you have finished speaking. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Members will note that the chat button has been disabled for this meeting. In the event that the committee requires to vote on an item of business before it at the meeting, in turn to announce your vote, either for, against, or abstain. I will then ask the Democratic Services Officer to announce the decision made by the committee following this process. An officer from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the Officer for Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. So, Michael, Democratic Services Officers, if you can announce the people in attendance, please.
Thanks, Chair. Members in attendance today are Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor Janice Lewis, Councillor Lynn Walters, yourself as Chairperson, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Richard Collins, and I believe that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Michael.
Chair, can I just say he's missed me out.
Apologies, and Councillor Richard Granville.
Thank you. I will now proceed to agenda business. And so the first item on the agenda are apologies for absence. So again, Michael, if you're able to give us the apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair. I received apologies from Councillor Alex Williams and Councillor Pam Davis. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other apologies, please? Oh, Amanda, I can see you've got your hand up.
Hi, two things. I was just going to give Alex Williams his apologies, but also when you did your opening speech, my internet was going funny, so I didn't know if it was your connection or mine. So if I disappear, then I'll be trying to log back on. So apologies for that.
Thank you. And Mike, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to leave at about 4 o'clock because I got another meeting to attend, that's all.
Okay, thank you for letting me know. Thank you. So moving on to the second agenda item, any declarations of interest, please? Okay, I can see no hands up, so we'll move on to item number 3, which are the minutes. Can I ask if we can Please can you comment.
I'll formally move, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, so no.
I'm happy to second it.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So, so if we've moved and seconded and no comments, I can't see any hands. Oh, Jill. Oh, we're moving forward to number 4. Is that okay? So moving forward to the action record, and Jill, I think you're going to take us through this. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, just a little trigger happy there, Chair. If you could bear with me, I'm obviously Mark Galvin is hoping to join the meeting later. He would normally take you through the action record, but I'll take you through it today. So the report that you've got in front of you, you'll be familiar with. It ensures that the decisions and actions made by the committee are actioned and implemented, and Appendix A shows those actions. So if I very briefly go through it, and I'll pick out just those perhaps where we need to just comment on the progress. So the first one, Regional Internal Audit Shared Service, that one's been completed, and the All Wales session's been completed. The annual corporate fraud report is on the agenda today. Audit Wales, the third item, perhaps Sam, Jason, you might want to comment on this. The reports on the financial sustainability and the National Fraud Initiative to be brought to this meeting. Do you want to update us on that? Oh, sorry, for the purposes of the recording, I should have said at the beginning, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. Apologies, Chair. Sam, Jason?
Yes, I can just quickly comment on the financial sustainability report. This is included in our performance audit work programme update, but basically the second phase of that particular piece of work, the work has been drafted and is currently going through moderation, so it's very likely to be presented at the next audit committee. Okay. Is that okay? Jason, I don't know if you can comment on the other item.
Yeah. So in terms of the NFI then, sorry, just to introduce myself, sorry, I'm Jason Blue. I've taken over from Mark Jones as Financial Audit Manager for Audit Wales this year. So in terms of the NFI, apologies, I think this has been raised a few times at audit committees previously, but I think that Dave Rees, who is our NFI manager, has had a conversation now with Jill, with the hope to come to the next audit committee when he feels that it would be more appropriate and he can give a more relevant update in terms of the NFI progress. So I'm hoping that that's okay.
Thanks, Jason. Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, thank you very much.
The next one, raising our game again, the fraud risk assessment is on the agenda. I don't know if either Mark or Sam or Jason want to comment on the training, developing training on fraud for the committee to undertake.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. If I could just say a couple of things. I think the later item you referred to in terms of the fraud risk assessment and the fraud strategy, I think the feeling was we'll take that through the committee today, see what comments and questions, picking up the issues arising from the strategy. Then we can have discussions then about further training and for members and others as well. It also links in with the other agenda item in terms of item 10, in terms of the effectiveness of the committee as well and further training. So we can bring all that together at that point, I think.
Great, thanks, Mark. The next one, the fraud strategy, obviously, and the training we've just discussed. The Audit Wales Governance and Audit Committee reports, there's an update. The external audit plan is on the agenda today, so we'll be hearing about that. to receive an update on grants and returns. I'm assuming that we could pick that up as part of the Audit Wales update. And we've just discussed the financial sustainability. Sam's updated us on that. So Treasury management strategy, that's been done. Corporate risk assessment, all those actions from the committee last time were taken away. I know that the chair has met with Lindsay, the corporate director for education and family support, and the risk register will come back in due course to the committee, but we have actioned all those recommendations from the committee. I'm assuming that we'll pick up the effectiveness of the audit committee later on the agenda, unless Mark, you want to say anything at this point, but it's coming back obviously in June. So that was all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you for taking us through that in Mark's absence. If anybody has no other questions on that, can I take it that we've all agreed that it's noted, we've noted the action record? Oh, and Councillor Williams, Councillor Amanda Williams, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yes, just on the document itself, I was just wondering, when I was going through it, in some places it says completed and it gave a completed date. But if you look at, for example, at the first one, it says target date January 2021. Well, that's passed. And we don't have a completed date column to show when they were completed. So I'm assuming that one's been completed. But then you look at others with the progress and it says coming to the next meeting. And then in other columns, it says coming to the April meeting. So I was just wondering if we could possibly have, rather than the next meeting, the dates of the meetings it's coming to and the dates that they were completed, the tasks. It's in some of them, but not all of them. So I had to look through the whole report to see which ones were coming to this committee to work it out myself.
I think that's a very fair comment, Amanda. Thank you for that feedback. So if we can ask Michael and Democratic Services to update the action log, I think that would make it a lot.
Yeah.
If that's okay. That can go through as an action. Thank you, Michael. And I can see Councillor Paul Davis has a hand up.
Chair, just apologise for being late to the meeting. I was going to put it in the chat, but it's turned off, so I just want to know, I have to do it verbally now. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Thank you for letting us know. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Williams, if you would like, Michael, if you could unmute Mrs. Williams, please.
Just trying now. It seems to be blanked out for me now. 2 seconds.
Oh, has Mrs. Williams gone?
No, she's still here.
No,
I can't.
she's still
I
here.
can't unmute her.
Are you able to unmute yourself, Mrs. Williams? I'm sorry, Michael isn't able to do it for some reason.
Yes, it has worked for me this time.
Perfect.
Thank you. Hooray. I just wanted to ask Jill about the risk management item. It's on the action log there, item 2, I think. I raised this at the last meeting. It was about the dramatic drop in the score for the item on transformation and savings. I just wondered what was the result of that, please?
Okay, thank you for the question. I haven't got it in front of me. By the end of the meeting, I might be able to find the answer to that, Mrs. Williams. We did revise the score, so if I can get it before the end of the meeting, I'll come back to you. If not, can I come back to you by email?
Sorry, you're still muted, Mrs. Williams.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Okay, so if everybody's happy for us to move on to note and agree that, I can't see any others. Mrs. Williams, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to come back on anything? No, lovely, thank you.
Chair, I'll formally move we noted.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's wonderful. So if we could now move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Audit Wales update. And Sam, if you're able to take us through your report, please. Thank you.
Yes, Jason, did you want to talk through the financial audit element first?
Yeah, that probably makes sense. So yeah, this is the usual update paper that the committee will be used to receiving. So as Sam mentioned, I'll excuse me, I'll take you through the financial audit bit, and then Sam will cover the performance audit element. So the financial audit bit is set out on the first page. So the first element is the grants programme of work from 2019-20. So we audited 5 claims, and as part of that audit process, we amended 2 of them and we qualified 1. So that programme of work is now complete. In terms of the 2020-21 statement of accounts audit, the audit plan is on the agenda, the next agenda item, and our planning work is now coming to a conclusion. We've done a large chunk of the I&E testing, so that's set us up now in readiness to come in for the financial audit work in June, in readiness to sign off the accounts at the end of July. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say really on the financial audit bit, and I'll probably pass over to Sam and then happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So yeah, so basically this is the 2020-21 performance, we're not that late, performance audit work programme, which is actually now drawing to a close. So really, if I could just draw your attention to some of the main changes since the last committee meeting. So in terms of the assurance and risk assessment, we have conducted that presentation with Corporate Management Board, and the output from this exercise I can run through in a bit more detail in the next item in the annual audit plan. Recovery planning work, and this has drawn to a close for 2021, although it is an ongoing exercise, and we will be issuing the council with a draft letter summarising our findings from the work over the last 12 months during the pandemic. As I've just updated you, the financial sustainability work, the second phase, that draft report is currently going through moderation, so we're hopeful that we can bring that to you at the next audit committee. Our digital review, the fieldwork has come to a close. We drafted and issued the first report and held that soft launch meeting with officers last week. We've now reflected on the comments made at that meeting, reissued the report, and are confident that we can bring that to a close and finalise as soon as possible. The COVID-19 learning project, that's still ongoing, and if you do have an interest, then please have a look at our website. The links are available in the report. The second item relating to local government studies, I've included this for information. So I suppose fair for me to say I'm not involved in the delivery of this programme of work, but if you do have any queries, I can take them back and provide you with a bit more detail, either by email, or I can talk it through in a bit more detail at the next audit committee. And finally, as usual, I have a list of recently published reports just really here as for ease of reference. Okay,
Lovely.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sam. And does anybody have, and thank you for all of the detail, does anybody have any questions for Sam or Jason, Audit Wales, please? No. May I just ask one quick question? One of the points you're going to be looking at are the carbon reduction plans, and I was wondering if you could just expand upon that, please, as to exactly the areas that you're going to be looking at, whether it's our heat networks or the 2030 plans. Thank you.
Okay, this will form part of our 21-22 work programme as part of our assurance and risk assessment. And at this stage, because of the importance of it within the national agenda, and obviously the fact that Welsh Government have stated there are now legal targets for a net zero, well, effectively a cut of 100% emissions by 2050, we would just look at some of the early arrangements and indications from the council in terms of what you propose to do in that area. So it's as high level as that.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. And thank you for all the reports. So as there's no other hands raised and no other questions, can I take it that we're all agreed to note this report?
Formally move, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. So if we could now move on to agenda item number 6, and thank you, Sam. So if we can move on to agenda item number 6, which is the fraud strategy. It starts on page 49 of your pack, and Jill, I think you're going to lead that for us, to take us through that. Oh, Simon, you're going to take us through. Lovely.
Yeah.
And have we had the Audit Wales Audit Wales plan yet?
Had I gone on too quickly?
I'm not
Chair,
sure.
There's a second item within agenda item 5.
Sorry, I'm Simon, do you mind switching your camera off? I do apologise. I'm flicking between 2 different laptops, so I'm really sorry. That was very remiss of me. So if we could do the second part, Sam, I do apologise.
Yep, no problem at all. Jason, did you want to talk through the financial audit section first?
Yeah, should we do the same again? And yeah, I'll start and pass over. So
Thank you.
this is the usual audit plan that committee will be used to receiving. It's the plan that's been agreed with officers and sets out our programme of work for the year, the time in the team, and of course the fee for the work. I think probably the first thing to say is that, as you'd appreciate, obviously COVID's had a massive impact this year, and this plan obviously provides a position at a point in time, and we're not anticipating any change, but obviously if it does, then obviously we'll have to come back to you with a revised some revised timings and agree those with you. So in terms of the financial audit section, then that's set out on pages 5 to 9. As you know, our primary responsibility is the audit of the statement of accounts and whether they give a true and fair view. We don't provide absolute assurance, and we work to the concept of materiality, and we follow a risk-based approach. So the key risks arising from our planning are set out on Exhibit 1. I wasn't planning on going through those on a line-by-line basis. Some of them you'll be familiar with from previous years, as they're recurring risks that come up each year. I suppose the main new ones this year, as you'd expect, are probably around the COVID risks, additional pressures being placed on finance staff in particular, and then the additional income and expenditure that will be included in the accounts as a result of COVID this year. So, we've drawn up a programme of work that we'll work through as part of our audit work to mitigate those risks. We also audit the returns for Coy Church Crematorium and Porthcawl Harbour, and we also do a number of grant claim audits. Those are set out on page 12, and they're the same grants that we've audited in previous year. So the fee for the accounts work then is set out on page 13. So this is based on the actual fee that we charged for last year, which was 6,000 less than the estimate that was included in last year's version of this audit plan. And obviously you had a refund for that element last year, so the fee for this year is £6,000 less than the estimate for last year. I think the only other thing to say is the audit team on page 14 is the same as previous years, except, as I mentioned, I've taken over from Mark as the financial audit manager. And that's probably all I was going to say on the financial audit elements. I'll pass over to Sam now, and then happy to take any questions then once that's been done.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if I could draw the committee's attention to Exhibit 3, if I just skim through the proposed work programme for the year. The first item, we have Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. The Auditor General does have a duty in this area. As such, I know we sent letters to the 44 bodies concerned, and the feedback from the consultation was that everybody really would rather us to focus on WFG as an integrated element within our existing work programme. So there won't be a separate project on this, but again, we are open to discussion, and as Jason has said, we do propose to be as flexible as possible. The next item, improvement reporting audit. This refers specifically to the Local Government and Elections Act and the new duties that local authorities have to provide a self-assessment of their performance. So we will take a view in terms of how well the council is managing that area. Then assurance and risk assessment, again, this is a standing item in our work programme, and I think I referred to in the previous update that we conducted that sort of presentation, well, it was a joint presentation with other regulators to the Council's Corporate Management Board, and these are some of the specific areas that we will probably be looking at during the year. We then have a thematic piece of work which we will be conducting at the 22 local authorities in Wales. We've called it Springing Forward. It's a very future focused piece of work that we're currently scoping, and we're particularly interested in terms of how councils are prepared for future challenges. I suppose with the pandemic in mind, we want to know how well equipped the council is in terms of the lessons learned from those experiences in the last 12 months and how they propose to transform and take on board those implications in terms of the future post-pandemic world and the delivery of services for people. Then the follow-up review on the Disabled Facilities Grant, and kindly this is an element of our agenda of the meeting today. So really we're interested in progress made against our proposals for improvement from our piece of work we did, I think, about 2 years ago. The next item concerning the Health and Social Care Partnership in Cwm Taf Morgannwg. This has been in our work programme. I think it's the third year now. The first couple of years we were looking at the time, the transitional arrangements and governance arrangements for the partnership. We're now moving forward and taking into account the fact that a lot has happened in the last 3 years, and especially the pandemic. So we are revisiting the scope of this piece of work and are currently having conversations with the council in terms of Bridgend, but all the other partners involved in the Health and Social Care Partnership as well. And the final item is around statutory building compliance. We're interested really in what the council is doing to improve performance in this area. So that's all I'd really like to say on this item. So please, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sam, and for the second part of the report, which I'd missed. Apologies. So, any questions for Sam, please? No, I can't see any hands going up. So, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
On that basis, can I now ask if people are all happy for the report to be noted, please?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So then we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the fraud strategy. And Jill, as interim finance officer, I believe you're taking us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. I only briefly wanted to introduce it. Simon is here today, and Simon and Joan are the authors, I think it's fair to say, and have done the bulk of the work. And I just wanted to thank them both for all the work that they've done in pulling this together. It's something that the Audit Committee have taken a keen interest in. And I think it's fair to say that there aren't very many blueprints out there for doing this. And I think that Bridgend is starting to lead the way. It's never been more important to have a fraud strategy. We've had umpteen attempts, I think it's fair to say, on both our network and our controls during COVID. And I think it's fair to say that we're getting increasing notifications of some rather clever tricks to dispose of some of our money in the wrong direction, let's say. So it's never been more important, I don't think. And I think this is our starter for 10. Simon will take you through it. It is proposed that once the Audit Committee have had an opportunity to comment on this, that it's taken through to Cabinet for approval. So if I hand over to Simon. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Simon Roberts, Senior Fraud Investigator for Bridgend Council. The purpose of the report we present to you today is to provide the committee with the Council's draft fraud strategy and framework for the years 2021-22 to 2024-25 and the draft fraud risk register. In July 2020, Audit Wales produced a report entitled Raising Our Game, Tackling Fraud in Wales. And the report identified 7 key themes that all public bodies need to focus on in raising their game to tackle fraud more effectively. In November 2020, a position statement against the national study was completed and brought to this committee. One of the recommendations made was that all public bodies should undertake comprehensive fraud risk assessments. If I draw your attention to Appendix A, this is our draft fraud strategy and framework to 21-22 to 24-25. And this takes into account the Audit Wales report and our position statement. So to take you through some of the key points of this strategy, page 6 identifies the key roles and responsibilities across the authority and shows the importance of developing an anti-fraud culture from the top to include the chief executive right down to each and every one of our employees. Page 9 of the strategy sets out the aims and objectives of the fraud strategy and framework. And page 12 sets out the current fraud landscape, which, as I think we all know, is ever changing. And this details how the council intends to keep abreast of those changes. Page 13 through to 16 sets out the fraud risk areas identified throughout the council. And then page 17 through to 18 sets out the developments and actions that the council proposes to take over the medium-term future to improve our resilience to fraud, bribery and corruption. Finally, at the back then, we've got on page 20, Appendix 1, a flow chart which shows our fraud response plan. If I could then move you on to Appendix B, this is our draft fraud risk register. Now, this lists 20 potential fraud risks that have been identified throughout the council, and the register outlines the consequences of each risk and also how each risk is being addressed and the key actions to be established. We appreciate that there are a number of risks that have been identified, and we have tried to reduce down that list, but we do feel that each and every one of them is in fact needed and needs to remain. We therefore brought the register to you in draft, as Jill has indicated, as we have done with both appendixes, and we welcome obviously your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And before I ask anybody for any questions, can I just say I thought this is an excellent piece of work, and it makes everything very clear. And yourself and I believe Joan from Audit on actually getting it as far as it has done. It's superb. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
And
Thank you.
I can see a couple of hands up. So the first hand, first of all, Richard, Councillor Granville, if you'd like to raise some questions.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, have we, over the last year, financial year, prosecuted anybody for fraud in the authority? That's the first question.
Yes, Councillor Granville, I believe in the last year we have, more specifically benefit fraud. The year prior to that, obviously our prosecutions were significantly higher and included blue badge fraud. Obviously, unfortunately, due to the situation we've been in with COVID and the pandemic, unfortunately for the majority of last year, I was unable to interview under caution at the offices, and I was only able to resume that function towards the end of September last year. And of course, that again changed towards the end of November, beginning to December, when the restrictions increased. And unfortunately, I had to stop interviewing members of the public again. I am back in interviewing under caution now, so hopefully our level of sanctions will increase to the level they were. But in answer to your question, whilst we did prosecute some people last year, it wasn't to our usual level.
Why I've asked the question is, if people see that in the public domain, they think twice about doing it. My second question is, tenders. As the authority obviously looks at tenders inside and outside, are we going to regulate and check or spot check tenders for misuse?
Okay. In response to your first point about it being published in the media, I entirely agree with you on that, Councillor. And we do always actively try and publish any prosecutions we have. You may be aware that when we had the Blue Badge exercise, which took place back in 2019, there was quite a large media coverage of it, which not only went out locally, but went out nationally across the UK in UK Parking News. So we do try and publish anything, and that includes benefit fraud as well, which goes through our communications team. But obviously it is up to each individual media outlet to see whether or not they'll pick that story up. But I do agree with you in that. In regard to the second point, I may have to ask one of my other colleagues if they're able to answer that better than I would.
So I can see both Jill and Mark, you've got your cameras on. Are you able to respond to Councillor Granville's question, please? I don't know who wants to take it.
Perhaps we're probably going to say the same thing, so I'll let Mark go first.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, what I was going to say was at the last Governance and Audit Committee meeting, we brought a report in relation to contracts and so on to give assurance in terms of the processes that were in place at Bridgend, and that we were able to give reasonable assurance on that based on a fairly substantial sample of contracts that we looked at over a period of time. So it is something we always factor into the internal audit plan in terms of looking at the process for awarding contracts and evaluation and so on. But obviously the council's own processes are there to make sure that things are done properly, because that's the first sort of line of defence, to make sure things are done as they should be. So I'm not sure if hopefully that was what Jill was going to say as well, but we'll find out in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, it was pretty much that, Councillor Grant. We do have obviously our own checks and balances, financial procedure rules, contracts and letting is one of the very, very strictly controlled areas. And we do rely on audit to look at our key controls, and we haven't actually had anything that suggests that we haven't got all the right controls in place. So I'm reasonably satisfied. You can never be complacent, and there's always areas for improvement, but it's not an area that I would identify as a risk. There's always going to be a fraud risk associated with anything where there's significant sums of money involved, and that's really what this fraud risk assessment sets out.
Thank you, Chair. Why I've mentioned about tenders was we've gone through this committee and we've looked at care and repair and people doing works in houses, haven't we, Jill? Right? That's what I'm looking at when they're going back and doubling up and doing their work, or not, they haven't done it right or tendered money for it. That's all I'm concerned about, is we're not getting ripped off as a council.
Okay, can I park that for this item, and can perhaps when we go through the DFG report, Councillor Granville, see if what we're doing in response to some of the recommendations satisfies that?
Yes, thank you, Jill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you both, or thank you all of you. So Mrs. Williams, I think you're the next person who would like to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. And it would seem that my mic is working at the moment, so I have unmuted myself. Okay. Thanks very much. I really welcome this this strategy and the risk register, and indeed I welcome Simon into your role. So good to see someone really focusing on this for the authority. And as Jill has said, it has been a long time coming, but very, very welcome, and a very comprehensive report here before us today. I just have a general question on Appendix A. And then I have 3 or 4 questions, Chair, on the risk register. So would you like me to list them all for you now?
Simon, are you happy to take all of them all at once, or would you like them one at a time?
Yeah, I'm happy either way, really. Jill, have you got any?
No, fire away, and we'll try and make a note, and you can remind us, Mrs. Williams, if we forget something.
Okay, fine. With Appendix A, I mean, it's very good, very comprehensive, but I'd just like to ask about the action plan. we're talking here about, am I right in understanding this as a 3-year action plan? And therefore, there aren't any implementation dates on it. So that's my first question, really. Can you comment on that, please? I appreciate this is a draft, but I would just like to know about when are those implementation dates going to be entered, and am I right in assuming that they're going to be phased over the 3 years? With Appendix B, I have rather more questions, but also a bit more focused, I think. First of all, there are a lot of risks on this. 20 risks is a lot. But I just want to clarify. I can see obviously you've listed them all in terms of their nature or their what you call area. But I wondered if it was possible for us to have information about, and so, some of this is obvious, but could it be just recorded which directorate stroke service area these risks are arising in, just for clarification, so we all know what part of the authority is most exposed, if you like. And I appreciate some of that means some of these risks are applicable to all of the services. I understand that. Second question is about the actions that are planned. Are you going to be able to identify the risk owners, if you like, of these individual risks, and what post holders, that is, are going to be implementing the actions, the future actions? I'm talking here, of course, about when you come to finessing this, because you are stressing that it is a draft, and I appreciate that, but I want to know a bit more about what are your thoughts about, I suppose, filling in some of these key areas. The third question I have is, you talk in this strategy about the risk register. The fraud risks will be integrated with the overall corporate risk register of the authority, and I very much applaud that. That would be expected. I'd just like to know a bit about your thoughts about how is that going to work exactly. How will you decide, which risks will you be scoring these on the fraud risk register, and then including certain ones above a certain score in the corporate risk register, or how will you decide, how does this integrate with the corporate risk register? And then my last question you'd be glad to hear is really more for possibly Mark and colleagues. I'd like to know a little bit more about, you've got all these risks listed. You have a lot of mitigating processes and actions already in place to protect against these risks. You have many actions planned, but is there any feel at the moment, coming out of Mark's work perhaps and his colleagues on the internal audit reviews, any feel for just what is the position regarding our fraud risks in the authority? Even if that is informal at the moment, what are our feelings about these things? Because some of these risks, of course, have been ongoing. I think the cyber fraud risk you've listed, I mean, that is very much exacerbated by remote working, which has been going on for a whole year now. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about what's your feeling at the moment about these risks, and what's the evidence that has come out of any reviews already undertaken about what their seriousness, the level of significance that they have. So I'll leave it with you to try to answer those. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, do you want me to, Simon, shall I kick off, and then perhaps you in internal audit follow on to rescue me, perhaps?
Yes, I'm more than happy, Jill. Yeah.
I fail. Okay, so the first, let's see if I've got these right now. So Appendix A, action plan. Yes, it is over 3 years, and yes, we will be working through deadlines, targets, actions. We are intending to have implementation dates wherever possible. Of course, some of it will be ongoing. So there will be no end or implementation date, but wherever possible, those we are going to put those in. So that's that, and it will be over a 3-year period. So that's Appendix A, but by all means, everybody else come in afterwards. Appendix B is an interesting dilemma. We had this debate, I think, over the corporate risk register about one council and shared ownership, and as opposed to hand on a shoulder and identifying somebody who is responsible. Now, I think you've almost answered your own question, Mrs. Williams, in terms of there inevitably will be some areas, particularly something like housing benefit fraud, where it's quite clear that it will be mainly my responsibility in terms of a responsible officer. There may be others, such as blue badges, that are very much identifiable, but then we come on to contracts and all the rest of it where it clearly will be across the piece. Now, you can get into a dread. We've got an awful lot of risks in here, and we didn't want to make it ridiculously busy where nobody will read it. So at the moment, we've identified again CMB, and my reason for doing that is not to abdicate responsibility, rather to give responsibility to people who may not think they had a fraud responsibility. Very much fraud and anti-fraud is seen as something that audit and finance take care of, rather than actually, do you know what, the schools, our homes, our all sorts of big contracts are where a lot of the money flows. So it's very much that this is CMB owned. So I know we had that conversation, and we will, wherever possible, make sure that people understand that it's their responsibility. But that was the theory behind having this as generic. And we have had that discussion at CMB very, very robustly and indeed Simon can vouch for the fact that he's interviewed all the corporate directors and chief officers in terms of identifying areas within their directorate that they feel are vulnerable. So there is quite a bit of evidence that obviously we can, show you that that they are, the corporate directors are very much bought into this. But we will consider whether there's something that we can do further in terms of identifying particular directorates. Obviously, if it's a schools issue, it would be fairly clear. So we could do some identification. And I think that's so that's the directorate that they're arising in, and that's going to be on an ongoing basis. And then obviously that links clearly to the risk owners in terms of the second part of your question, and happy for you to come back on that, obviously. The interesting debate about how it's integrated with corporate risk register is one that we did discuss in terms of, do we use the same scoring system? That felt slightly inappropriate because we also got all the directorate risk registers that feed up into the corporate risk register. So at the moment, what we've got to work through, I think, is how something becomes so significant that it jumps into the corporate risk register. And as the corporate risk register is discussed and debated, fraud risk is identified as we're discussing that. So there may be issues that feed into the fraud risk register as well. So that two-way process has got to be worked through in terms of what makes it so significant. So some of them are easy. Cyber, you talked about, so significant at the moment with all the IT, it is on the corporate risk register. But if it hadn't been, how would it have got there is the question you're asking, really, I think. And I think we've got to work that through in terms of, because otherwise we'll have an industry on this in terms of scoring and identification, and everybody will lose the will, you know, to do it. And I want it to be a working document that people really buy into. And then in terms of mitigating processes, I'll let obviously Mark and others come in on this. We've now, touch wood, most of our reports are reasonable assurance or higher. We have very few, thank goodness, in the limited assurance, and even less with no assurance. But that's not to say that there aren't new ways of us being attacked in terms of fraud. And indeed, we have had new attacks. Simon's been dealing with some quite difficult issues in terms of the way people are finding a way. Only one came through today for retailers to purchase air purifiers, allegedly sent from the government, very authentic, but again, absolutely fraudulent. We've had all sorts of purchase order attempts, cyber fraud. So this is very real, and so that's why it needs to be something that we don't get complacent about. So even though we've always had reasonable assurance, we can still be sort of attacked. So I think I've tried to cover those. I don't know if I've made any sense at all. So Simon, Mark, perhaps you want to add to anything I've said.
From my point of view, Jill, I think you've covered everything really better than I would have on a lot of the points. So I certainly haven't got anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Just a couple of things from me, really. I think one question 4 was around sort of how is this all feeding into internal audit plans and what our coverage and our view of risk as well. Well, we're currently coming towards the end of our planning sort of process now to come up with the plan for this financial year. So the fraud risk register will play a key part in that, in making sure that we take full account of the work that's been done by Simon and by Joan, obviously. So that's integral. So we will be using that to feed into our plan. I just scanned through the items again. There's quite a lot of different headings there, as we've discussed. You know, we've covered most of these as a matter of course over a period of time. You can't cover everything all at once, but we do look at most of these areas on a regular basis. The current issue of the moment, and Jill has already touched on this, is cyber fraud, because obviously the importance and the risks linked to it have increased because of the home working situation, for example, that everybody, or most people are working from home. So we are likely to put something in the internal audit plan across all 4 authorities linked to cyber fraud, and making sure that the authorities have got the controls that you can put in place are in place. But there's no 100% guarantees on things, as we know. The first couple of items in the risk register around housing benefit, council tax reduction, single person's discount, you know, they've always been issues linked to those in all authorities, and Simon's obviously been working on those areas for a number of years. And there are a number of other items there that, you know, Bridgend has seen itself, and most authorities will have encountered fraud linked to some of those. For example, procurement or purchase cards or cash. All those things are, you know, by their nature, frauds can be committed. So what we certainly try and do is factor in all those issues into our planning and take account of controls and mitigation that are already in place, or our previous opinions play a part in that as well, and trying to inform that plan and the local intelligence of what's happening. And we use all that information to inform our plan, to try and make sure that we cover the highest risk areas and cover all those areas over a period of time. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Mrs. Williams, did you have anything that you wanted to come back on?
Only just to ask, and thank you all 3 of you indeed for that. That's very very helpful. I just want to ask Mark further, and I was going to ask you this under your internal audit reviews report, but I may as well ask it now. I mean, I would be interested to know, as you've just said, you're already covering a number of the key risk areas, shall we say here, key fraud risk areas. Procurement, purchasing card, etc. A number of those reviews are ongoing. And I would like to know, and you can tell me this in your later report if you want. I would like to know really, what stage those reviews are at, because those reviews are clearly very pertinent to this area, to the risk, to the fraud risk register, and to the eventual, and to the, not eventual, to the, I suppose, imminent, I hope, evaluation of these risks. Yeah. So I would be interested in that. And just finally, sorry to hog this, but I would also like to just know, how are we as a committee going to be updated as we go forward on this? Because I think you say in the strategy that you're going to give us a report at the end of each year, I think you say, and I'm taking that to be the financial year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, how will we be updated? Will it be through the corporate risk register? Is that probably our most likely source from now on these risks? So I'd just be interested to know about that, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. Yes, it will be on financial year, because this is from this April onwards, and I would anticipate that we'll bring a fraud report back, not just through the corporate risk register. I would anticipate that we'll bring quite a detailed report on what we've done throughout the year on this back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Chair, perhaps can I answer Mrs. Williams' question?
I was going to say,
yeah, under item 11, that's where, as you mentioned, we've obviously got an item there in terms of progress against the internal audit plan, which Joan is going to take us through. But I'm sure Joan can give us an up-to-date or more up-to-date picture then in terms of the reviews that are being issued and currently in draft and so on. But that's probably the best place to answer that question if you're happy with that.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Mark and Jill, for being able to, and Simon for being able to respond to Mrs. Williams on those questions. So the next person with his hand up is Councillor Paul Davis. Paul, if you're able to come in, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Simon for the in-depth report and congratulate on his job as a chief investigator. I've done a bit of that myself, and he's not the only one here today that's interviewed someone under caution for an authority. I've had the pleasure of that, and it's not much fun, so good luck with that.
Thank you.
What I was going to ask is, a lot of the stuff we mentioned today, is sort of external fraud almost, people claiming benefits, etc., blue badge, that's people from outside trying to basically extract money from the council. Is there a culture in this authority? Or is that something that we're on top of, employees, trying to extract money or something out of the council? That's what my point is, Chair. So if that's only a single point.
Simon, do you want me to just pick that up? I think we've got a strong anti-fraud culture in place. We've got a very strong history, and Simon can vouch for this and give you more detail, certainly on council tax reduction and prosecution wherever it is appropriate on housing benefit. And we have done that exercise that you were aware of as the audit committee on blue badges, and a lot of those other councils haven't done. And haven't done to the extent that we have. So we've got a very strong anti-fraud culture. But nevertheless, as I've said, sadly, wherever there are sums of money, you will inevitably get people from outside the council trying to get us to dispose of that money in their direction. And I mean, we've had a lot of money that's gone through the council recently. I just think of the amount that's gone through on business grants, the amount that's gone through on on self-isolation payments, on all sorts of different areas, and inevitably people will be attracted, sadly, to trying to gain from that. So, but I believe we have a very, very strong anti-fraud culture in the council. Simon, would you?
I mean, I'd agree. I mean, obviously with the implementation of the recent e-learning module, which has gone out across the council for all staff, which only heightens really our response and our culture of strengthening our culture across the authority, which is mandatory for all employees to complete that, and all members, I believe. So that certainly gives a good, a good learning curve really for everybody to pick up on the things they need to look out for. In regard internal fraud, as Councillor raised, I know that we do keep a robust register. I believe the internal audit section, which involves any employees or any employee matters which need to be investigated. But in the case of benefit fraud, where we have had cases which have unfortunately involved employees of the council, again, they dealt with in the same robust way as any other, and involving somebody from the outside.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for the responses again. So, Councillor Cheryl Green, I can see you have your hand up as well, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's not actually about this report. I feel I have to return to what Councillor Granville brought up. I have no problem at all with the general principle. However, Councillor Granville referred to a company that I and the Cabinet member sit on as council nominees on the board. I'm not aware of any problems whatsoever in terms of their performance. And in the absence of a legal officer, I'm rather concerned that we should be perhaps getting some legal advice on this because the remarks were potentially defamatory.
Okay. Thank you for raising that, Councillor Green. Jill, should we be getting legal advice now, or is this something that we should be taking away later?
I think it'll be up to Councillor Granville. Perhaps was there a misunderstanding of the suggestion? I put that back.
Yes, there was. Yes, there is, Chair. Absolutely. I didn't intend anything of what Councillor Green has just said.
Chair, I just think...
And I would apologise if it's been taken in the wrong, if I've said it in the wrong way, Cheryl.
Yeah, I mean, all it is, Richard, is in your own interest, in my opinion, because we don't have a legal officer here to advise us. It was very clear. It is a public meeting. It can be viewed back. And obviously, this is an independent company that Councillor Phil White and myself have sat on for the last 4 years, and I've not been made aware of any irregularities whatsoever in its dealings. So I think that just should be made very clear.
Okay,
and I would, Chair, and I would concur with that. It was a subject matter that we were talking about in a previous meeting, and I apologise if I didn't mean anything about anything like that, Cheryl.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, Chair. I just felt it was safer to clear it up in this meeting rather than be challenged at a later date.
And thank you very much, Councillor Green, for doing that. I do appreciate that. And also, Councillor Granville, thank you very much also for your clarity as well, and clarifying what you did and didn't mean. So that is very helpful. So thank you. Thank you both. Okay. I can't see anybody else has any other questions, but I do have a couple of questions, Simon, if I may, to you. On the flow chart in Appendix A, should there be a loop at some point where some cases may flit from yourself to internal audit, or from internal audit back to yourself? So on the flow chart, is that a possibility? If it isn't, then it doesn't need to be there, and it's only a minor thing, but it was just for completeness.
No, that Chair, you've raised a very good point. I'll certainly look into that. It is a very valid point, and something I think perhaps that we need to look at. So that is something I will look into.
Thank you. And then the second point, again, it's a small point, but it's actually got quite large implications. Under risk number 9 in Appendix B on election fraud, there's no mention of postal votes. Is that something that, are there any, I'm sure there are procedures to make sure there aren't any fraudulent postal votes, and it was just, should that be built into the strategy as well, please?
Yeah, Chair, that's another very valid point. I think what I'll do on that is I'll meet with the electoral department and just identify what mitigation they've obviously got in place currently, and I think it probably should be included, and we look to put something in there for that.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you again for the report. I can't see any other hands up asking for any other questions. Can I ask for a mover for the report, please? That we have, we've noted the strategy and framework and the draft risk register.
Yes, I'm happy to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. That's wonderful. And Simon, thank you again. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is the anti-tax evasion policy. And I believe Nigel Smith from Finance is going to be taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Nigel Smith, Interim Group Manager, Chief Accountant. The purpose of this report is to inform the Government and Audit Committee of the new anti-tax evasion policy, which is at Appendix A of the report. The report provides the background to the requirements for the policy, which are under the Criminal Finances Act 2017. The Council needs to take steps to establishing and maintaining effective arrangements to prevent and detect acts of bribery, corruption and tax evasion in relation to its council services. It requires all elected members and employees to demonstrate the highest standards of honesty and integrity, which includes compliance with the relevant legislation. The Council already has in place an anti-fraud and bribery and anti-money laundering policies to support the effective arrangements to prevent and detect acts of bribery and corruption, which are monitored by this committee. This policy has now been developed specifically to address the prevention of tax evasion and provides a consistent approach for all employees and any person who performs services for and on behalf of the Council. The anti-tax evasion policy is supplementary to the Council's wider anti-fraud and bribery policy, which sets out the key responsibilities with regard to fraud prevention and what to do if fraud or financial irregularity is suspected, and the action that will be taken by management as a result. Cabinet approved the new anti-tax evasion policy on the 9th of February 2021. The Governance and Audit Committee are asked to consider the policy as part of their role to obtain assurance over the Council's corporate governance and risk management arrangements. The policy will be reviewed and updated as required on a biannual basis. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Does anybody have any questions for Nigel on this policy, please? I can't see any hands going up. I do have a question, Nigel, is how is the policy going to be rolled out, and the implementation or any findings, how will that be reported to this committee, and how can we prove that we are implementing the policy effectively, because it's across all directorates? So yeah, how can we prove that we're being effective, please?
Very good questions, I think. In terms of sort of actions that we have done following the approval of the policy, the Council did issue a press release in February confirming that. In terms of monitoring, Simon have just heard our fraud officer will record sort of any instances of tax evasion occurrences within the Council as part of recording any referrals we receive, similar to the Blue Badge or Housing Benefit and Council Tax fraud. So we'll have a means of kind of monitoring that that we'd be able to sort of report on. I think we can look to add something to our existing online e-learning module on fraud, which we mentioned a bit earlier, but we probably could strengthen that a bit more to include this policy now. And we could look to use Progenders as well to make sure we communicate that policy to the staff, and that any new staff then are required to sort of undertake any e-learning and review that policy as part of their induction. In terms of how we can prove we're implementing the policy effectively, obviously the monitoring will play a key part in that, and we could sort of bring back probably a report on anything that's happened during the year, very similar to what we would do on the previous report in terms of an annual report. It's always difficult because you've got to know that something's happened to prove it, or otherwise. But hopefully that will give some reassurance there, but I'm happy for any further questions.
Thank you. Well, I suppose my other question would be to our audit, and thank you for that, Nigel, would be to our Audit Wales colleagues as to what they would expect to see from their perspective as well, please. So I don't know, Sam, whether you're able to, or one of your other colleagues is able to come back on anything on that.
I think I prefer, if possible, for financial audit to come in here.
Okay.
Sam, I'm not sure if you've got your microphone.
Your mic, that's it.
Oh, sorry. I was hoping financial audit could come in here. I think they're probably better equipped to respond.
Thank you, Sam.
Sorry.
Jason? Sam, is Jason there?
I'm not sure if Jason's still on the call.
I can see his picture at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
I'll email.
Okay. I suppose where I'm coming from with that question is that an awful lot of work has gone into the into pulling this policy together and to get it rolled out, and but it is one of those things that I can imagine it would be very difficult to prove one way or another that if we don't come across any anti-tax evasion issues, it's going to be very difficult to report, and we don't want it to become a huge industry in actually dealing with this. So it's really wanting to make sure that we're not, if I use a gold plating reporting mechanism, so that it becomes overtly onerous. And so it's really just a case of understanding expectations. I can see Mrs. Williams, you've got your hand up. I didn't know if you wanted to come in on this point.
Yes, just to comment, Chair. I mean, it's very interesting to see this policy getting firmed up. We have to have it by law. But really, you know, to me, it's part of the whole suite of policies, really, which includes the fraud policy and the strategy that we've just been looking at. And if you look at Nigel's report in some depth here, you know, the areas where this kind of evasion might be happening, some of them are very much the same as the ones that we've just seen on the fraud risk register: payments, payroll, construction industry. Yeah. So I think that there is there can be what would you call it? A combination here with the fraud strategy. And I think we can, I would suggest that the monitoring of this risk, which is what it is, and our obligations under it, under the law, could be done in conjunction with our work on the under the fraud strategy and in monitoring the fraud risk register. So I would suggest that as a potential way forward that could be considered. Okay,
thank you very much, Mrs. Williams. So is it probably best then that we'll leave it with finance and fraud to look at this and work out the best way to report back, and for if Audit Wales have any issues or any comments, that they send them direct to Nigel in the first instance, so that he's aware of anything in particular. Is that okay as an action?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So On that basis, as nobody else has any other hands up, could I ask that everybody's in agreement that we note the anti-tax evasion policy and the proposed amendments to our terms of reference, and that further reports will be coming to the Governance and Audit Committee in due course? Have a mover, please.
Yep, happy to move it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams, and thank you, Nigel, for that report. We now move on to agenda item number 8, the Local Governance and Elections Wales Act. And Jill, I believe you're taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. The Audit Committee will be familiar with some of the changes that this Act will be bringing in. This consolidates some of those changes and gives you an opportunity to review those changes. We haven't got all the details, so there may be difficulty in answering some of the questions that you undoubtedly will have. But if I take you through the report and the changes, and then perhaps we can have a discussion. So the Local Government and Elections Act 2021 was given royal assent on the 20th of January 2021. And the whole ambition of this Act, I think, really is to streamline and become more flexible on performance, good governance and improvement. So it's very much driving at local authorities being much cuter, for want of a better word, about how they report on performance and governance. So obviously that is pivotal to the Governance and Audit Committee. So most of the changes in the Act cover some of the electoral arrangements, and you will have seen some of the detail on that. The general power of competence that's been talked about for many years was in England for some time, but now obviously coming in through this Act, which gives a much wider set of powers for local authorities. Democratic governance and leadership and public participation in local government. So encouraging local people to participate in local government, and some reforms around the democratic governance and leadership for both officers and indeed members. Quite significant reform of the performance and governance regime, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Collaborative working, you'll have seen some of the powers that are coming in to initiate the establishment of corporate joint committees, covering at the moment transportation and planning, etc., but actually could cover a wider range of functions should that be appropriate or desired. So the 4 functions at the moment that are being looked at are obviously economic wellbeing, transport, strategic planning and school improvements. And then finally, voluntary mergers of principal councils. So very clear that compulsory mergers are no longer government policy, but obviously there are powers to facilitate voluntary mergers of principal councils should that be again appropriate or desired. So some significant changes actually for the Audit Committee. The first one is the change of name, and that's already been done. That had to be done by May 2021. So we've obviously taken that through Council. And then from May 2022, some prescribed changes to the membership of the Audit Committee. A third of the members to be lay members, and the chair to be also a lay member. and also to replace some of the audit and reporting duties with duties with regard to self-assessment and panel assessment, which is a peer review. And that's quite a significant change, and there are some quite onerous challenges really in terms of how the council will do their own self-assessment, will have peer review, and will do an independent panel performance assessment. And we're in the process of trying to work through some of the ramifications of that, because even though we don't actually have to report until the summer of 2022, it will be on the year 21-22. So obviously quite a deal of thinking going on as to how we might make a start on that. There's no expectation that this will all be all done completely by that date, and all our systems will have changed, because obviously it will take time to review all the performance systems and make sure that we've got those in place. And then finally, for the Audit Committee, a duty to review and assess the Council's ability to handle complaints. And that will be a new duty for this Audit Committee. And you will, I'm sure, wish to consider how we might go about that particular recommendation. So at 4.2, the proposals are that the terms of reference of the committee within Part 3 of the Constitution to be amended to include the bullet points set out in 4.2, and at 4.3, the recommended changes around governance and the new legislation to be put into the Constitution. And I think that's probably all I wanted to say, Chair. It's recommended, obviously, that the report is noted and the proposed amendments to the terms of reference and purpose of the committee to be presented to the Council for approval. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jill, for that, for taking us through that report. I can see that Cheryl has would like to ask a question. So Cheryl, if you're happy to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I note that there are to be 1/3 members that are lay members and the chair to be chosen. Is there a default position should we fail to get those members? Because we've got no control, we can't make people apply to sit on audit. And what if none of them wanted to chair because they could have busy jobs, etc., etc.? Is there a default position then?
Thank you, Councillor Green. I wish I had the detail
so that's the legislative requirement. Could you?
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, I think my signal must be dodgy. So please, yeah, I was going, Jill, if you're able to respond, I do apologise.
Yeah, sorry. I wish we haven't got the detailed regulations yet, Councillor Green. I'm anticipating that will be covered in there. It's a question that I've asked as well. Where are all these sort of lay members going to come from? I mean, from time to time, obviously councils have experimented. Some have already got lay members, more than one. We've obviously got Mrs. Williams is a lay member on our audit committee and makes a fantastic contribution. But if there weren't 4 more, if you don't mind, Mrs. Williams, me using you, if there weren't 4 more of those in Bridgend, and as you say, and none of those wanted to be chair, then there will be some difficulties, and I share your nervousness over this, Councillor Green, in many respects. And we're hoping that obviously the regulations will say what happens if you can't attract people. Sadly, I mean, I've always found audit committees to be incredibly interesting places to be, but not everybody is always attracted to being on an audit committee. So so we'll have to wait and see, I think. So sorry, I haven't got the answer.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. Janet, and thank you, Jill, for that. Janice, Councillor Janice Lewis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me. It's going back to 8.1, where it says individual elements of the Act will have future cost implications. Are we aware what the cost is at this moment in time? Do we have a guideline on that, please?
Jill, are you able to come back on that one, please?
I am, but I'm going to be particularly poor at answering some of the questions, I think, today. No, we don't. There, as you go through it there, you can see that there will inevitably be additional costs. The electoral changes, the changes to the performance system in terms of peer review inevitably will add additional costs to the council. The public participation could add costs, collaborative working, and certainly, you know, if you go into a whole-scale merger, there will be costs associated with that. So we haven't got to a point, unless Deb wants to come in and tell me that that we've got anywhere near looking at what those additional costs would be. We hope that there will be some resources associated with implementation of this Act, and we'll come back to you, I guess, once we've got more definitive costs. Deb, did you want to add anything? I don't want to drop you.
Thank you, Jill. For the recording, Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. No, we don't, to be honest. There's so many different elements to the Act, and they're all commencing at different times. We're aware that there are potential costs. For example, the corporate joint committees are due to be established during this financial year. And whilst we would envisage at some point there would be potential savings further down the road, there's obviously likely to be initial setup costs. But I don't think, because we haven't had any of the guidance, any detailed guidance at the moment, we're in a position to identify any of the elements at the moment. So obviously we'll be keeping a watching brief on this, and obviously looking at the guidance to see what the actual requirements are on us, and obviously any cost that we have, hopefully we will get some additional funding from Welsh Government more on an ongoing basis rather than just a one-off grant to you know, set all these different elements up. But no detail at the moment, unfortunately.
Thank you, Deb, and Councillor Lewis, I don't know if you've got a follow-up question that's on that.
No, Chair, I'm quite happy. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then Councillor Paul Davis, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at section 3.3, the summary of the Act introduces, Chair. On the bottom point, it says there's 2 points on this. There's removal of returning officers' fees, removal of returning officers' fees, or local elections. Hello, Chair, have I lost you?
Yeah. No, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
So, Jill, are you able to? Yes, I did. You were asking about the removal of returning officers' fees or local elections.
Jill, that's right, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Jill, are you able to answer that?
Yes, sorry, I didn't really pick it up. Which section did you refer to, with apologies?
Councillor Davis,
section 3.3.
3.3.
And it's the final bullet point about the removal of returning officers' fees or local elections.
Right, yes, that's just what, yeah.
Is that a typo there? Should you say for local elections?
Yes.
Is that
yes.
right?
Yeah.
We're reading that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not taking away the local election.
No, no.
No.
It should read for local elections.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
When they're talking about returning officers, they're not talking about the returning officers in each polling station. I take it. They're talking about the.
It'll be Mark in the chief, whoever it is. Normally the chief executive. Yeah.
Exec's role. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. That's all it was.
Thank you. There are no other hands up. Could I ask a question? As we're going to have a new responsibility of reviewing the effectiveness of the complaints process, or the ability of the council to handle complaints effectively, would it be possible to have a paper to this committee, possibly in Q3, so that it's after the audited accounts have been finalised, to actually enable the committee to understand how how the complaints process is actually being worked at the moment, because not everybody will be familiar with it, and just how effective it is. Would that be possible?
Yes, I think Chair, that's entirely reasonable. I can't remember when the committee after the accounts is, but it's I think September probably. So I think the committee do need to look at that, because it is a duty now to understand the complaints process, and also to get some data, perhaps an analysis of number, type, and the process as well. So I think familiarisation with the process and the data, and therefore an ability to influence that before the duty, before the annual report, obviously, and therefore an ability to ask questions. So I'll take that away as an action.
Thank you. And then my second request is, as more clarity comes down the line to us, would it be possible for a training session for all members of the Governance and Audit Committee to actually understand the full ramifications or the ramifications for the committee, and rather than having it in a governance and audit meeting, I think it would need to be a separate training session, and it may be that there needs to be a number of them as clarity or working practices are shaped in the council. So would that be possible to organise, and would councillors who are currently on the committee, would they welcome this? If you would welcome it, could you just raise your hands, please, just so we can get an idea as to yeah. So I think there would be a number who definitely would welcome that. Thank you all. If that could also be looked at, please. Again, timescales, I know we need to bear that in mind.
Just thinking aloud, Chair, I just wonder whether we could combine it with the fraud training. Would that be helpful to members of the committee to have that and complaints?
I think that would be really good. Yeah, but not just on the complaints on the training, but I think it's also training across the whole of the local governance and election changes to the committee.
Okay.
So it's across all of it, and that's why I think there may be more than one training session that is needed as more information comes down the line.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that away. Thank
you very much. So there don't appear to be any other questions. So can I take it that we're all happy with the recommendations to note the report and the reforms to the current committee, and note the amendments to the terms of reference and purpose of the committee being presented to council for approval?
Moving note, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jill, for that. So now we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, the Disabled Facilities Grants, and I believe that Martin Morgans is going to be joining us, Jill, is that correct?
Yes, I'm hoping that that's seamless. Yes.
Oh, it
while
was.
While I was presenting, Martin and Lynn, I think, is here. Lynn Berry as well, who has come to the audit committee previously on this item.
Lovely. Thank you both. Thank you both for joining us today, and I'll hand over to you to take us through the report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't say very much because Martin and Lynn will take you through the report. What I did want to just say at the outset is that this has been quite a long, complicated process, as the Audit Committee will appreciate. We brought a report back in January with intentions and where we'd got to, and I think this just builds on that and gives you further progress against some of the recommendations and an opportunity really to ask us some questions. So I see this as a series of reports coming back to the Audit Committee because I know there's been a really keen interest in progress on this particular issue. So that was all I wanted to say, and Martin and Lynn will take you through the report.
Thank you. So over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Martin Morans, Head of Partnerships for Gen Council. As you can see, it's quite a lengthy report in terms of what we've put together, and Section 1 refers to the purpose of the report, which is updating the Governance and Audit Committee on the progress with regards to DFG and provide a position statement for where we are currently. Can I take you to Section 3 in terms of the background? We've had numerous reports to this committee, Cabinet, CCMB. We had multiple recommendations, and they form part of our thinking in terms of where we go with regards to disability facilities grants. Section 3.2 outlines the Wales Audit Report in 2017-18, which was a user-specific review, and they found a number of recommendations specifically associated to that the disability facility grant user. The Regional Internal Audit Service report in 2019-20 had recommendations, plus it acknowledged limited assurance in terms of the DFG service. And then 3.5, we've been, obviously, Jill has referred to earlier, we've been to this committee a number of times and taken on those recommendations, which culminated in a Cabinet report on the 19th of January 2021 to outline our approach with regards the DFG service and how we're looking to improve it. Some of the key areas of that report to Cabinet was adopt an in-house provision with regards to delivery of the DFG service, enter into a collaboration agreement with Neath Talbot Council as they had the necessary capacity to support us in our journey. Recruitment of staff. As we move into new ways of working, we will looking to recruit staff, and also to create a framework for our builders on the basis that we wanted to ensure the work that we devolved out to the DFGs goes into the local economy. That was a key driver for that framework in which we're working on currently. If I can take everyone to Section 4, then the current situation. 4.1 to 4.6 outlines the progress to date in terms of the Cabinet report and what actions we have taken to date and where we are from a position statement. I'll move you then to 4.8 in terms of that represents a historic performance of our DFG service, and it outlines the reasons why we're here today and looking to change the process. Our PIs are ranging from 242 days per DFG from 16-17 to 290 days from 18-19. Obviously, significantly poor performance when you compare it to the Welsh average of 207. I'd like to take members then to 4.10 in terms of our aspirations in terms of this 2-year pilot of getting this service up and running and working. So in 21-22, we're looking at 240 days, and in 22-23, 210 days, which is a stark improvement in where we are. Section 4.12 outlines some of the risks associated we identified as part of the review and the internalisation of the DFG service. Obviously, staff recruitment is going to be key for us, and our inability to recruit those staff members will mitigate our ability to deliver the service. Hence the collaboration agreement with Neath Talbot. Delays in developing the framework, ensuring we've got the right framework in place, working in partnership with those local builders within the borough. and then transition from Neath Talbot Council. So when we've got the right team in place, how will we transition that service on there? And without, it appears in every meeting then, COVID-19 and the impact that's had in terms of access to and delivering DFGs to citizens in this timely, bizarre place. Section 4.14 overviews the benefits, which is the whole reason why we're here today. And I think it's about that citizen-centred approach. And we all do it. We want to deliver the best service in a timely manner for our citizens to enable them to live comfortably in their own homes. Because evidence points that people can live longer and safer in their own homes, and that's what the DFG service was, and it's what excites myself and Lynn about making a difference in the community. Section 8, I won't dwell too far on it, is the financial implications, and that covers off that, as you'd see, in terms of the differential of the agent model versus the in-house, there's cost neutral. So there's no difference in terms of the cost of the model of delivery. However, it gives the council the end-to-end delivery and ownership, which has come out in numerous recommendations and reports. And I'll take you to section 9 in terms of the recommendations to note this report, and we'll be very welcome to take questions and have a discussion with you where we are at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that full report. Does anybody have any questions for Martin or Lynn, please? I can see Councillor Cheryl Green, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just quickly, it refers to the latest full data set available as being 1819. I just wondered why 1920. I can totally understand the year of COVID, 2021, being totally different, but 1920, why is the data not available?
Martin, Lynn, do you want to pick that up?
Yes, I think COVID has had an impact on the ability to collect data, and that was the last data set we were able to find from the sort of data resources. So I think I would like to say that a decision had been made in relation to the year of COVID and the pandemic, and a decision was made not to collect data at that time. But I think I prefer to come back to you. That was the latest data that we could get, but I'll come back to you with a definite reason as to why that was. I have seen it, but I wouldn't want to give you the wrong message. So we'll come back to you on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Lynn and Martin. I can't see any other questions. One of the I've got a couple of questions. Is the recruitment going to start? And then are there any blocks to negotiating with Neath Port Talbot and entering the collaboration agreements? So they're my two questions, please.
Okay, Chair, if I just pick up the collaborative agreement, there's been a huge amount of discussion, and we have been working with a different arrangement up until now with Neath Port Talbot. This is just firming it up in terms of the legalities and making it a more collaborative agreement, because Neath Port Talbot believe there are things that they can learn from us, as well as them helping us with resource and expertise as well. So it's going to be a quid pro quo between the two councils. There are a few loose ends to tidy up in terms of procedure, the way that we tender for contracts and the framework, and we're just in the process of tidying those up, and we'll bring that back to the audit committee. Okay. So perhaps Martin, then you pick up the point about the staffing.
Can I just pick up the point on the staffing and follow up after? In terms of the staffing, we want to sanction and get the collaborative agreement in place, because the whole focus with Neath Port Talbot is that we can work jointly with them and develop our staff. So we've been reviewing job descriptions and profiles in terms of what we want to do. So we're in a reasonable position to, once everything's ready, to hit the button on that. But ideally, we've taken an agile approach and develop. We can see roles change and morph as the process work we're doing in terms of assessment, and that's the benefit of working with Neath Port Talbot, is we will look back into the social services area where referrals actually come from, and maybe change the way we actually do the DFGs, and that's something they're keen to work with us on in terms of that assessment.
Okay, so I must admit I'm now a little bit confused, because in the report it says that having the staffing is critical to the success, and I know that Jill has just explained that there's a little bit of time. So how quickly do you anticipate you will be able to get people in situ? Do we know, are they particular skills that are going to be difficult to get from the current job market, or the availability in the area? So it's how easy do we think it's going to be to implement this plan?
I think that's what the reason why it's a risk, because when you look at the type of roles we're looking in terms of surveyor type activities, there is a shortage in that area of expertise, and as you can imagine, local private sector in terms of housing have put in lots of changes, and there's a drain on that resource. So that's why we highlighted as a risk. So specific aspects of the DFG process, specifically a surveyor type of person, is going to be a struggle. Hence why we put that down as a risk. But it's about us mitigating this in terms of normalising and making the functions of the DFG service more generic. So we're not specialists. So it's about Lynn profiling with her team in terms of those low-level access showers, ramps, and non-complex things to allow us to take, we don't have to have a senior surveyor as an example. We can take a junior, and we're identifying a training program as well in terms of supporting existing staff and bringing on new people. So it's about how we then chop up the type of work. So I think the more complex area, yes, it's very much similar to ICT. There's a shortfall of resource in the local South Wales marketplace. So it's about us how we can attract and develop that model to support us from that perspective. So the answer to the question is a risk, because it's a real risk, and it will be a struggle. But until we go out to advert, we'll really know the timelines on that, which is as soon as the collaboration agreements, that we'll be going out for some of those key roles.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And Lynn, I can see you want to come back.
Yes, it was just really to add to what Martin has said. I mean, this is a significant change for us, as a service, taking on the agent role. We haven't done it before. And one of the benefits of collaborating with Neath and Talbot is that we learn, how we do it, because they're operating as an agent now and have been for some time. So there's a steep learning curve for us. And I think that coincides with the fact also that our policies and procedures haven't been updated for a while. So there's this dual strand really, or journey that we're going on. We're learning about how to do the agent role and have that responsibility from start to finish. But at the same time, we're going to be looking at our policies and procedures, how they need to be updated, how they can be streamlined. And the report does make reference to information and sort of a digital platform, because we're really conscious that some of the systems we have are very old-fashioned. We're not really providing the information that we want to, either to applicants or maybe other departments, and how we work with them. So there's a number of strands to this that will all, sort of come together. And I think that we'll get to a sort of I don't know, a sweet spot, if you like, where we come to that position where our processes and policies are quite clear. We know what the roles are, we'll have learned the lesson, and then we'll be able to go out for the key jobs. But there is an intention to start building some of the jobs that we've got currently. We've never had sort of assistant surveyors, so we're looking at sort of building our own team, if you like, getting people in early at this stage. Possibly, I don't know, we have been looking at whether there's an opportunity for some apprenticeships, so we start building our team rather than having to rely on the market, which sometimes can be difficult.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you very much, Martin. Councillor Granville, you have a question.
Well, it's not a question, Chair, it's a statement. I agree with Lynn. I think when we've got our own people, apprenticeships, they tend to stay with the authority. When you pull in people in, they just come in and then they might look for another job. But at least if you bring them in and teach them the right way, they tend to stay with us. So it's a good thing in one sense. And I'd just like to thank the officers for their diligence and time in doing this, because this is a good report and it's needed. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Councillor Granville. Are there any? There's no other comments, I don't think. So can we move on to the recommendations? So that am I happy? Is it fair to say everybody's happy to note the progress to date to improve the DFG service and the current position?
Moving on, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Martin and Lynn, thank you very much for the report and coming to the meeting, and good luck with the implementation. Hope it all rolls out smoothly. Thank you. Take care. Bye. So if we move on to agenda item number 10, which is the effectiveness of the Governance and Audit Committee self-assessment up. Sorry, has my signal gone?
It did temporarily then, Chair, but yeah, I think you asked me to present the report, is it?
Yes, yes.
Right, for the purposes of the recording, it's Mark Thomas, Head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Yeah, so in your agenda pack, this is agenda item number 10, and it's page 125. So the purpose of the report is to update members of the committee following the feedback on the findings of the self-assessment of good practice from the SIPFA Audit Committee's Practical Guidance 2018 checklist, originally reported on the 28th of January 2021, and is to summarise members' responses to the skills questionnaire and to gauge their level of knowledge and experience of key areas. Just at the bottom of that page in section 4, the checklist was presented to committee on the 20th of January, as I've just mentioned. During the meeting, it was agreed that members of the committee would be given the opportunity to provide their own feedback. In addition, the chair arranged some sessions which members were invited to join if they preferred, and I know a number of members did that. Paragraph 4.2 then, a draft report is attached at Appendix A, which provides a summary of the findings and the feedback received from members of the committee, whilst Appendix B is the updated checklist. The draft audit report includes a management implementation plan, which lists the recommendations being made as a result of this work, and the skills and knowledge questionnaire that was presented is also included at Appendix C for reference. What I was just going to do is move on down to pages 130, which is the start of the actual draft internal audit report. And just to summarise there, the strengths and areas for improvement that were identified. A number of strengths and areas of good practice were identified, including members of the Governance and Audit Committee engaged with the self-assessment checklist process, and members of the committee have completed a training needs assessment, and then there were some areas then for development relating to a number of members felt that they lacked reasonable knowledge or skills in certain areas, and the Governance and Audit Committee did not fully meet all the requirements of the self-assessment checklist as was identified. At the end of the report, there's a management implementation plan, which is on page 138, which identifies 8 recommendations. There's only one recommendation which was regarded as significant, and actually that's already been addressed in the earlier report linked to the Local Government and Elections Act. So the terms of reference is in the process of being updated, and a report will be taken to Council to confirm that, and the changes that we identified that were needed are also included in that report. And then the other recommendations there in the action plan are all recommendations regarded as merits attention, so the things that for the committee to consider. We've had a discussion with the chair last week on how to actually go through this report, and there were some items on page 133, so I'm going to skip back up on page 133 and section 612, which summarised the feedback that was given by different members. So I think what we discussed, or with the chair was whether the chair was happy to take the members through this part of the report and just to get a consensus of what the committee's view was, because some of the feedback might have been relating to it, certain individual members, as opposed to the committee as a whole. So he was trying to get a feel for, really trying to get a steer from which ones were the issues that members wanted us to take forward, and we can include that then in the final report. Is that okay, Chair, if I hand over to you?
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Mark. And apologies, I do hope my signal isn't causing too many problems today. I don't quite know what's happened with the Wi-Fi here, so apologies for any distortion. So if I can ask all members of the committee, so all councillors and Mrs Williams as the lay member, if we can all turn to page 133 in our packs and 6.1.2. And so it's really just to understand the majority view and which parts of the feedback we want to take forward, the individual feedback. So the first one was that the ethical framework for BCBC needs to be enhanced and better articulated so the committee is able to meet this responsibility. So does everybody, you know, are there any thoughts on that from members? Are you in agreement or disagreement? So if you're in agreement, can I ask you initially to put your to show your hands with a show of hands as to whether you are in agreement with that first bullet point? Nope. So Councillor Paul Davis, Mrs Williams.
Chair, can you just clarify what you're asking again? I didn't get to the page in time and I struggled a bit there. Can you just clarify again what you asked us to?
So what we need to do is, as a committee, the members of the committee, we need to, there's been feedback from all committee members, and we now need to get a consensus as to the actions that we believe we need to take to make the committee effective. And so what I was going to do was take each of the bullet points in turn, starting on page 133, where it starts with the feedback provided, and the first bullet point where there were comments from the committee was that the ethical framework needs to be enhanced and better articulated so the committee is able to meet the responsibility of assuring that the ethical framework is robust. So I asked if I could have a show of hands if people are agree with that first bullet point, that we need to improve, or we need the ethical framework to be enhanced and better articulated. So it would appear from, there's 2 shows of hands, 3. From then it would appear, oops, slowly hands are coming through. Right, so it would appear on that basis that there is a majority who agree with that that first bullet point. So we will need. I think the action will need to be for us to take that away, and with those actions, Mark, if you and I can have a discussion afterwards as to how best to take that forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
So
thank you.
If you could all clear your hands again, please. Now there are 2 hands there. Is that because now, Mrs Williams, did you have a question on the approach? And also Councillor Janice Lewis, just want to check you're happy with this approach because you've both got your hands up.
No, sorry, Chair. I'm just a bit slow on getting my hand down.
That's okay. That's okay. I just didn't want to. I just wanted to make sure that we're all happy with this. Okay, the second bullet point is that additional meetings should be considered to avoid excessively voluminous papers that can be difficult to absorb prior to meetings. Can I have a show of hands whether you agree that additional meetings should be considered? Okay, so we have four hands up. So that is the majority of the councillors here. So I think we need to again work with that one with, yeah. Okay, so if those hands can go down then please. And then the next bullet point, a 30-minute pre-meeting for members only to discuss issues and agree questions. This would not stop questions being raised during the meeting, but may assist in streamlining the questions and processes. And whilst we've said it's to reflect the approaching scrutiny committees, there would be no officers present. It would only be the members of the committee to chat through things. Now, I can see, Jill, you've got a hand up on this one. So do you want to comment on this before we get a show of hands from the members?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think you've just explained that. The Audit Committee, or the Governance and Audit Committee, as it's now called, shouldn't act as a scrutiny committee in any shape or form. So, so I would guard firstly against having officers present to do that role, particularly scrutiny, because that shouldn't be the case, and also try and guard against having preordained questions, because it does stop the quite natural flow of interrogating reports and the role of the audit committee. So I would just temper what's in the report to make sure that the committee can function properly.
Okay, thank you, Jill, for that clarification. So having had that advice from Jill, could members indicate whether if they did want to for this to be looked at with careful guidance, if they do want it to be looked at, a show of hands. Alternatively, if taking Jill's advice into account, you don't want this to go forward, please keep your hand down. Right, so there are no hands going up, so that one can then be discounted. Now the next bullet point is a statement that says new members do not receive, after the first year, do not receive specific audit committee training. But I propose that should be reworded, that new members who join the committee after the first year do receive specific audit training. Do people agree with that comment? If they do and they want that taking forward, could I have a show of hands, please? Again, there is a majority there, so if we could take that forward, please. So thank you, and if those hands could go down. And then the next one, it's only partly instead of fully agreeing that there is an appropriate mix of knowledge and skills amongst the membership. Without wanting to lead the committee, could I just give my stance initially, in that from my perspective, I welcome the fact that not everybody has a risk management, a specific risk management or audit background on the committee as members, because I would be concerned that all risks are looked at in just through one lens and not through a vast experience that people can bring. So that I'm just putting that out as a so before we go to a vote on this, I would like to ask if any members have got anything in particular they want to say on this issue prior to us having a vote. So if anybody has any comments on this, could they raise their hands? So Councillor Amanda Williams.
I agree with you in that I don't think we should have everyone with the same knowledge, because we need people, for example, with business knowledge to look at business elements. We need some people with social services background to look at that. And it's all about having a wide selection of people, the same like with school governors. We don't want all school governors to be teachers, because we're not there to scrutinise that governing, that school as teachers from elsewhere. We need a broad range of people who can give a broader way of thinking and ask different questions. Otherwise, we'd all be scripted, asking the same questions all the time.
Thank you for that. And Jill, I can see you've got your hand up for a comment.
Yes, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to say that Councillor Williams's point was absolutely spot on. And it is about making sure that you've got the right blend of skills and experience, and also checking that you haven't got a big gap in those skills and experience that you might need to think about when you attract new members to the committee. So absolutely spot on in terms of the comments.
Thank you. Thank you both. So on the basis of the comments that have been made, do we just yeah,
you go down that road. Can I just ask, I'm a bit concerned about that, because the simple reason is you're disenfranchising members from sitting on this committee that have been elected by the people, right? How do you go about asking members then, who's going to do that? To say, like, Richard Granville, right, you haven't got any qualifications, right? You haven't never been blah, blah, blah. You can't go on that committee. Steve Smith, yeah, you've done it. You can go on that committee. How are you going to, how about the lay people? Is it going to work for the lay people as well?
Right. If I could just come back on that, Councillor Granville, I'm advocating that you don't have to have audit and risk, a risk background to come onto this committee. That's what I'm advocating, and I believe that is also what Jill is advocating and Councillor Amanda Williams is advocating.
I was rescinding what I just said then, Chair, in light of that.
That's okay. We're not advocating that. It would be too dangerous to have everybody with a pure risk accounting audit background. We would not do a service to the council if we did that, and that is yeah, that's where I'm coming from, and I think that's where everybody so far. Mark, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, just to support that, Chair, really, and in terms of we've already had the report on the Local Government Elections Act and the increase in the number of lay members from next year in any event, and that's part of the purpose of that, really, it's unrealistic, I think, to expect all councillors to have all this experience and knowledge. They got different knowledge and different skills they can bring to bear, but that's where the lay members will come in. They would need to be recruited, and some of those skills we would be looked for in that process, so that would then help add to the skills already exist amongst the elected members. So, yeah.
Right. Okay, and Councillor Paul Davis, you wanted to come in with a comment.
Yeah, I thought I had to come in on this one, being one of the first, mentioned it many times in the past about training and my lack of audit skills. And I did speak to this, I think, privately, my concerns about myself regarding this, and you explained to me then about the am I coming through because everyone's frozen? I may have been kicked out of the meeting. I'm not sure, Chair.
No, you are still there. You were breaking up a little bit. I didn't know if it was at my end or your end, Paul, so it may be a combination of both, but please do carry on.
So I don't know where I got to in that, Chair, but as I say, just to say that I spoke to you privately about this, my concerns about myself, basically, and you put my mind at rest then, that you haven't got to be an accountant, basically, be on the committee. That would obviously exclude me. So, and like I said, next year we may be leaving, some of us may be leaving anyway for these lay members to come on. So, we'll just see what happens next year, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it won't be. It'll be the year after. It'll be after our elections. So it's the year after our elections. Yeah. So
some of us may not be here then anyway. So we'll see.
Absolutely. Who knows? Who knows who will be here after the elections?
No, that's going to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you. So on that basis, can I ask for a vote on whether we agree with this bullet point of only partly instead of fully agreeing that there is an appropriate mix of knowledge and skills among the membership? So if people agree that well, basically people are saying that there isn't an adequate mix of knowledge and skills among the membership.
What do you recommend in vote for against this, Chair? I'm confused again, sorry.
I personally don't agree with this statement, personally, because I personally think that we have some people who are very financially or risk aware, and we have other people who bring other skills and other experience to the discussions, and I value that personally.
Are we raising our hands to?
I would prefer you not to raise your hands, but I'm not trying to lead the committee. So I'm bit.
What I'm confused that is, do we raise our hands for support or not raise our hands for support? What do you ask?
I would prefer you not to raise your hands for support on this, as this is not, I think, an action that we need to take forward. That we, in my view, we have the right skill mix on the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Gosh, everybody's very compliant today. You've all kept your hands down. Wonderful. So the next one, there is inadequate knowledge of what the Governance and Audit Committee does by other members of the Council, not on this committee. Do you agree with that? If you do agree with that statement, if you can put your hands up. Okay, we don't have to take an action forward on that one. And then we have some members do not have the knowledge to perform their function effectively. So this would be if people believe that they have training, there is training that they would like, or there are some knowledge gaps that they would like to fill. And this is not a name and shame, but it's a case of if people believe that that there is support that would help them to be more effective on the committee, and it's just really for a show of hands on that.
Chair, can I just say, my own opinion is that I think training should be mandatory on this committee. As the law is changing and things as what Jill has said, I think it's more prevalent for us to do that. And if people can't attend these meetings, they should be separate training after us, or catch up with the training. Because if you don't know what the subject is about, you can't make a decision on it. If you don't understand how it works, I think that's what Jill was on about. So I think it should be mandatory, your Chair.
And I know that there is training on the initial things, and it's very much that goes back to I'm just trying to think which it was, the new members who join the audit committee after the first year do not receive specific audit committee training. So moving forward, would everybody be comfortable with mandatory training for people joining the committee at whatever time? And then we've already said in this meeting that we're going to have some specific training on the new government, on the new bill, and fraud and complaints. So would everybody be supportive of that?
Chair, why I've said that is there are members on this committee that are on planning. And one of the situations on planning is that you have to do the training before you can go sit on a planning committee.
But right. Richard, there are slightly different things with planning in that there are legal requirements on the Planning Commission that you are making decisions that the council is bound by, and that is why some of that training is absolutely mandatory. I'm actually advocating that we have a core base of training which was rolled out to all members when we were back in 2017. So what I'm advocating is that all members on the committee need to go through a training plan to understand core elements of the activities on the audit committee. People joining after the first year also would need to do that training. And then as and when things change, like the new legislation coming through, we're going to have training on that and on our new responsibilities. So I think we are violently agreeing. If people support that. Richard, are you voting, or do you want to come back on a comment?
No, I'm voting, Chair.
Right, okay, if people could vote if they agree with that about having training for people coming on the committee. Right, so only, oh.
So, sorry, you just froze then for me. I'm just trying to get my...
Sorry, I'm so, can I apologise on the recording for my dodgy Wi-Fi signal. So it's if you could vote if you agree. We have got a majority of people saying that they agree with training for people coming onto the committee and training for any changes to what we do as a committee. So thank you very much. If you could lower your hands. The next one, right, as this committee in comparison to other overview and scrutiny committees of the council requires a very specific skill set, it is suggested that all group leaders and non-aligned independent members undertake a skills audit to identify those in their political groups who are best placed to sit on the committee. This will ensure that the committee is comprised of those members with the most appropriate professional background and knowledge. I believe that from our discussions, we have really already debated this and discounted this. Are people in agreement that if you're in agreement with what I've just said, could you put your hands up?
Chair, I was just going to say what you just said. That we've already discounted this, haven't we, in a previous decision, haven't we? Really, so it's not, no, we can't go against that. We're going back against what we decided. So I agree with you.
So we can ignore that. Great stuff. So we can ignore that one. So you can lower your hands again, and then slightly disagree that the arrangements to hold the committee to account for its performance are operating satisfactory. Oops. So it's are people happy that the arrangements to hold us to account are operating satisfactory? Or if you believe that, so if you believe that more needs to be done to hold us to account, please raise your hand. Okay. No hands being raised, so we can discount that one as an action we want to take forward to. There is not always a good level of discussion and engagement from all members in meetings. So really here, it is, I would welcome comments as to any suggestions on what we can do to improve that. So Councillor Amanda Williams, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because you can't make somebody ask a question, and you can't make somebody understand an element of what's being discussed, because like we've said in the past, if they've got experience in certain areas, they might not be on that agenda for that meeting. So their expertise won't be relevant for that meeting, but it'd be more than relevant for the next meeting where they might have plenty to say. So it's another one of those difficult ones.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, you have raised your hand as well.
Yeah, Chair, I think this meeting actually disproves that statement, because I think everyone in the meeting is how that statement is. You can't contribute on everything, as you say, because you don't know what you are weak on some things, but when you can say something, everybody speaks and I can see of it.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that basis, can I have a show of hands as to if you agree with the comment that there is not always a good level of discussion and engagement from all members in the meetings? Maybe that should be yeah. Can I have a show of hands if you agree with that statement, please? Right, so we're not going to take an action forward on that one. And then the final bullet point is response to, does the audit committee report directly to full council? Should be no and not partly met. One of the reasons on the survey that it said about being partly met was because quite often a lot of the reports that come to us then go on to council, and it says that it has been discussed and approved or recommended by the audit committee. So that was why it was put down as partly met. So you may or may not agree with that. So if you agree with the response that it should, as it says there, that it should be no, can you have a show of hands, please?
Chair, before we take a vote, can we just, I think there needs to be a bit of clarification on this. If our report goes to the CMB or the Cabinet, they can tweak perhaps something that we've perhaps not done properly or looked at, and then it should go to full council. Should that not be the procedure? I don't know. I take legal advice from Jill here.
Yeah, Jill, would you mind taking that question, please? You're on mute, Jill.
Yeah, sorry, your report is your report. It's the report of the Governance and Audit Committee straight to Council. Cabinet don't have a role in terms of editing that report or tweaking it, so it's your report.
In light of that, then, Chair, it goes to full council then?
Yeah, so but we don't actually we don't do, at the moment, we don't do a full report to council on the audit committee. None of the scrutiny committees within BCBC do that. That's something that's going to be coming through. We look at reports and we have our comments on the reports that then go to council. So Jill, I'm really looking at you on this. Do you think that is sufficient?
I mean, it's good practice to do an audit committee report. I don't think Mark can help me here, but there's no necessity for it to go to full council. It would be part of your giving members greater understanding of the role of the audit committee and scrutiny committees. But I would think we could take this away and discuss with Kelly what she would prefer to take forward. But I think the issue about doing your reports and publishing it on the website is the right one to do, regardless of where it goes from there.
Lovely. Okay.
Yeah, just to support what Jill has said, I think Jill's described it accurately. I think in the checklist, it's sort of seen as good practice that the audit committee reports to full council, and I think the actual draft job descriptions I've seen for the lay members and the chair of the under the new legislation is seen as reporting directly to full council, but it's not a requirement. It's seen as good practice, so it's a decision for the council. So as Jill has said, there's a couple of other recommendations further in the report that we've put in, and it's for consideration by the council as to how he wants to do things. So this is just getting clarification really from the committee to either support or not some of those views. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, so on that basis then, that one's covered, Mark, or we're going to get clarification from Kelly as to what we need to.
Yeah, I think it's about getting clarification. I think because we'll all have slightly different opinions on it. Things do go up to council, but is that the same as reporting directly to council? It may not be exactly the same. So I think it's something to flag up, as Jill said, with Kelly as the monitoring officer, and then determine, well, actually, is there a scope for maybe having an annual report go into full council, for example? But that will be a matter then for BCBC to determine.
Thank you. Okay, then, so I think that has taken us through the recommendations that you wanted us to look at, Mark. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we can then take forward, you and I can take forward with any other officers the actions, and can I just thank all the members of the committee for being for participating in that. So on that basis, could I have a mover that we have considered and responded to the audit report, please?
I formally move, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move on to
Chair, your mic is off. Chair, your mic is off.
Thank you. Sorry, my notepad had just gone onto my cursor. I do apologise. And Councillor Mike Kern, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I got to leave now, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Running a bit late, but I thought I'd better stay for the votes.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate you staying late. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So I'll hand over to Joan for agenda item number 11. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Joan Davis, the Audit Client Manager. I'd like to take you through the standard report that members are familiar with. It's the progress against the internal audit risk-based plan. In front of you, Appendix A, it details the status of each planned review, the audit opinion, and the number of high and medium recommendations made to improve the control environment. I'd like to just say that although this is very late in the day, it must be noted that this is a draft final position, as some work is in the process of being completed, and the outcome of this work will be included at the head of Audit's annual internal audit report, which will be brought to a future Governance and Audit Committee. The report at Appendix A illustrates that to date 26 items of work have been completed, of which 19 audits have resulted in an opinion being provided. A total of 13 audits are currently ongoing and will be included within the final audit opinion. As I said, Appendix A identifies at the minute 28 medium or significant recommendations have been made to improve the control environment. The implementation of these recommendations will be monitored to ensure that improvements are being made, and in the annual report, progress will be reported to members on that. Also, you'll note that it's recognised that some services are currently under intense pressure, and where possible, planned audit work has been rearranged to accommodate any service requests. Therefore, you'll see in Appendix A that some planned audit reviews have been deferred following a request by the Service Department, and these will be considered in our following year's plan. However, from the work undertaken, the indication is that there will be sufficient coverage to form an audit opinion, and that will be in the final annual report. Following on from Mrs. Williams's query earlier in the meeting, if I just quickly go through Appendix A and let you give members an update as to where we are, because obviously this report was produced a number of weeks ago, so I can tell committee where we are with the ones that are marked as ongoing. Risk management, that's a piece of work that is being undertaken on our behalf by SWAP, and they're in the process of finalising it, and I should have it for review and issue next week, so that will be included in the opinion. The COVID remote working questionnaire, we've had all the responses back in and we've collated those. So again, we're producing a report, and again, that will be issued and will be built into the opinion, but also that will help inform our plan moving forward, because any issues brought up there will feed into our plan. If I go down on page 157 towards the bottom there, there's a debtors piece of work that wasn't a normal audit piece of work due to the pressures in the department. What we've done there, we've taken we've looked at data, and we've done some data analysis just to compare with previous years as to where the council are, to give some assurance that even though we've had particular very unusual year, that the position as far as the debtors and the income is satisfactory. Again, so that will feed in. There are some items deferred there which are on page 158. The next ongoing piece of work is the contract monitoring piece of work. Again, that's something that SWAP is doing on our behalf, and they're concentrating on the Communities Directorate. Unfortunately, there was a delay in starting that piece of work because of ongoing pressures within the department, so it's unlikely that'll be finished in time to inform our opinion. So that will be a piece of work carried forward, and that opinion will feed into next year. As far as schools are concerned, the other two pieces of work there is the schools, a schools questionnaire or CRSA, and also school purchasing cards. Again, very late, at the request of the head of service, I was asked to defer those pieces of work because of the pressures on school at that particular time. So again, we will issue those now moving forward once the schools have settled down and before the school breaks for the summer term, as long as we get the okay from the directorate. ALN out of county charges, that report is with me for review, so that will be issued and will inform the opinion. Other than that, the other ongoing pieces of work are the pieces of work that we do ourselves in respect of recommendation monitoring, the annual opinion report and the annual planning. So they're ongoing, but obviously they are coming to an end now. And finally, the security breach piece of work, that is something that will sit outside of an audit opinion. That is something that's done as not a formal audit. That's more of an investigating piece of work. That's all I'd like to say, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joan. Does anybody have any questions for Joan, please? Oh, yeah, Mrs. Williams, you've raised your hand.
Sorry to be so slow there, Chair.
No, fine.
Thank you to Joan for your clarification on those ongoing items. That is helpful. I guess what my question earlier was about really is more, and I appreciate you're going to give us your opinion, but is there anything coming out of those reviews that we should be concerned about in relation to the fraud risks?
No, nothing specific. No, we always take account of fraud when we do a piece of work, and if there was something, we would make a relevant recommendation. What we'll do in our annual report is pull together the recommendations and give members a flavour of the type of recommendations that were made. But from the top of my head, without analysing them, there isn't anything of a fraud nature that members should be too concerned of. There were, as I said, at the minute, there's been 28 medium recommendations, and I don't think there are many, if any, that specifically relate to fraud there. But again, that will be demonstrated in our annual report that you'll have at the next meeting.
Thank you very much for that. I have just got two further questions, if I may, quickly. You mentioned the security breach, and that's an investigative report. Can you just comment more on that? What is that about, please?
It's just we've been asked to do a piece of work. There's a potential been a potential security breach, so there's been an allegation. So I'm currently having a look at that piece of work just to see whether it is, and it's an actual investigation under the council's disciplinary procedure. Sorry,
I would like to know a little bit more. What kind of a security breach?
I was just going to say, Jay, because it's a current investigation, we can't really go into any of the detail at the moment, but I'm sure that at the right time we can sort of give relevant information to the committee. It's too early at the moment, I'm afraid, Mrs. Williams.
So when will that be then, Mark, do you anticipate?
I think it's going to be concluded fairly soon, but it'll be dependent on what happens and what the outcome is in terms of at what point we can give the committee a bit more information. So sorry, I can't be more precise than that at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Can you then give me some idea of the financial amount involved in the supported living money loss, please?
Yes, it was minimal. I think it was about it was definitely under £150. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was since it was found. So we had notification from the manager that months later the money was found by an individual in a bag, I think it was, that she hadn't used for a number of months. However, out of that came a lot of recommendations to improve their process. So there were weaknesses there, even though it looks like there was an oversight at the time when the money was actually found.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Williams, and thank you, Joan, for that full report and all of the answers. Can I just ask one question on recruitment and swap? Are we anticipating that we will still be using swap during for the next year? And how's recruitment going?
As far
sorry. Go on,
sorry,
Joan.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, as far as using swap, they're finishing off pieces of work or carrying on with some work they've already started. However, we're just about to go out to tender to test the market on getting any interest on providing support for internal audit services, because we've obviously engaged with SWAP now for a period of time, so that arrangement has come to an end. So we will be looking to engage with someone, just with no promises of how much work we give them, but it'd be something to help support the service. But obviously Mark has got some more information on that, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. Yeah, just to supplement that, yeah, the structure has basically been agreed. There's some HR issues that we're working through to finalise that. We have recruited a trainee auditor that we start in the beginning of May, so that's good news in terms of starting that process. But we're anticipating being able to recruit to the rest of the vacant posts over the coming months. In terms of swap or any other provider, there's always going to be probably some sort of necessity to use an external support from time to time, but we envisage that reducing in terms of the volume and frequency that'll be done in the coming years. But there's always a place for using external support on occasions when it's needed.
Okay, can I just clarify one thing? When Joan said the swap arrangement is coming to an end, is swap going to be included in the tender or not? Because it was just if they weren't included and we still needed support, we then may have a gap. So it's just a case of understanding how that gap will be filled.
But it'll be a matter for them as to whether they tender. So we'll make it. It'll be open to whoever expresses an interest, and I would anticipate them putting a tender, but obviously that would be a matter for them. So I can't give you a guarantee, a certain answer, really, I'm afraid.
Sorry, I suppose I should have said, are we excluding them from the tender process? But that isn't the case. That's lovely. Okay, thank you both very much for that. So can I have agreement that that we may now note the report and move the report, please?
Yep, fine.
Yes, that's fine. Sure.
Thank you very much. And so moving on to agenda item number 12, which is the Internal Audit Charter. And Mark, I believe you're going to take us through that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a report that the committee receives on an annual basis, and the purpose of the report is to present to members of the Governance and Audit Committee the Regional Internal Audit Service Charter, Internal Audit Charter for 21-22. I won't go through the background because members will have read it, and it's something you receive on a regular basis. But Section 4 of the report, current situation, the public sector internal audit standards requires the head of audit to review the charter periodically, but final approval resides with the Governance and Audit Committee. Regional Internal Audit Charter for 21-22 is attached at Appendix A. The charter was fully reviewed and amended for last year, 2021, to have a consistent charter for the 4 councils that we cover, and that is consistent with the objectives of the Regional Internal Audit Service, that is to eliminate duplication and apply best practice. We've reviewed the charter again for this year to ensure it continues to reflect the requirements of the internal audit standards and is applicable to the 4 councils involved in the shared service. The only changes made relate to the change of title of the committee, becomes the Governance and Audit Committee, which obviously did in Bridgend in any event, but to reflect the position across all 4 as a result of the Local Government Elections Wales Act. So that's the only change, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. And any questions for Mark on the slightly updated charter, just with the name? No. So can I take it as that we are approving the report and the service charter and moving the report?
Move, Chair.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Mark, for that. So we're now moving on to agenda item number 13, which is the forward work plan. And Deb, I believe you're taking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the recording, I'm Deborah Exton, Interim Deputy Head of Finance. Like the previous report, this is a standing agenda item, and the purpose of which is to seek approval for the proposed forward work programme for the next municipal year, the 21-22 year. So basically, in order to allow the committee to undertake their core functions effectively, we present a forward work programme at each meeting, setting out the items that are due for discussion at future meetings to give members of the committee the opportunity to endorse the schedule or to consider who they want to invite to the meeting to discuss the various agenda items, or to determine whether or not there are additional items they wish to consider. So set out in Appendix A, we've got the proposed forward work programme for the next municipal year, and that's subject to obviously agreement of dates at the council's AGM. And it shows when all the various reports will be presented during the year. One of the things that we've mentioned earlier was that obviously due to the Local Government and Election Wales Act, there may be additional items that are being brought to the committee during the year. And one of the things that's been mentioned was a report on the complaints process. So I think we'll have to treat this as a little bit fluid, and obviously we'll be adding papers and reports to the forward work programme as we go along. But hopefully, given the position that we've got at the moment, that sets out all those items that are standing agenda items, and then obviously dates for when all the other reports are likely to be presented. So taking you to the recommendations in section 9, it is for asking you for members to approve the proposed forward work programme.
Chair, I'll formally move that.
Thank you very much, Richard. And does anybody have any questions for Deb, please, on this? Great. Well, thank you for moving that report, and thank you very much, Deb. There is one question I have for the committee, is that it's just to really bring everybody's attention to the fact that because of the accounts year end and the finalising of the accounts, originally we were due to have a meeting at the end of May, and but because of the year end work, that has now been moved to the 18th of June, and that is actually a Friday as opposed to our normal Thursday. And my understanding is that the meeting at the moment is planned for around 10 or for 10 o'clock in the morning. Whilst we don't know until the AGM exactly which members will be on the committee, is 10 a.m. on Friday, Friday of June, going to be okay for the current committee members? If you could,
Chair, I can't make it. I'm working. I go in early to get to this meeting. There's no way I can do 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, thank you. Would you be able to do the afternoon if we're able to?
I'll go into work early to make sure I'm back to come to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Other councillors, would you be available in the morning, or would you be available in the afternoon? If you could, Councillor Williams. Amanda.
Just to say I'm available all day, thanks. So happy to go with the majority.
Thank you very much. So
same for me, Chair. I either or doesn't I don't mind.
Lovely. Cheryl?
Either, Chair, either.
Thank you. And Janice? Janice, you've got your hand up. Could you do all? Janice, we can't hear you. No. And Mrs. Williams, would you be available Friday morning and afternoon?
Currently, no problems there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, if we are able to get it to the Friday afternoon, could I ask Jill if you're able to take that forward with Kelly to see whether we could get it to the Friday afternoon? Would that be possible, please?
Yes, I'll take that away, and I think Michael's here with the minutes. He can also take that back, but we'll try and get it on for Friday afternoon.
That's lovely. Okay, well, thank you everyone for all of your participation and involvement in today's meeting. We have and can I just check? We have considered and approved. Yes, we did do that. Yes, sorry. So thank everybody for their involvement and participation in the meeting, and I declare the meeting closed at 4:43.